Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And a series I wanted to start, now that we are after the 2025 season, is doing redrafts of like the past couple of drafts, only the first round, and sort of see where teams would have who teams would have drafted if they were able to do these redrafts. So I figured we start with the 2025 draft, and if you guys do like this video, I'll continue it next week with the 24 draft. And so, with no further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with the number one overall pick, which the Titans hold, and I mean it's a pretty easy pick in my opinion. It's gonna be Cam Ward, um, just because like I know a lot of people think Jackson Dart had a more prolific first year at Tyler Shough, but Ward was considered the number one quarterback and like top five prospect. Like he would go ahead of Fernando Mendoza if the two were coming out in the same class. That's no shot at Fernando Mendoza, but it's just Ward was that great. And as much as people want to say Dart or Shuck, Cam was better. And I think no matter how you slice it, the Titans would still redraft that guy, knowing as long as they hit this offseason, Ford will be fantastic this year and really show that he was the true number one pick, and it's not Dart or Shock. But those guys will be going off the board in these next couple of picks. If we got the Browns at number two, I'm gonna go with Dart. I think he had a more I think he had a better rookie um year than Tyler Shuck, in my opinion. I know he was banged up and he is reckless with the ball, but I think Dart was still pretty good. And Cleveland would not trade back if they knew they could get their franchise quarterback with it. I think Jackson Dart can be with the Giants. I don't think him and Shuck are as locks as I think Ward is, more so because Ward was the number one pick for a reason. Like Shuck was a second rounder. Dart was late first. Usually, if you're going like the top half of the first round, you're more seen as a lock as a first, like as a franchise quarterback because the league viewed you as an elite um player to draft. But I still think in a redraft, Cleveland would keep the second overall pick, and we're not going to do any trades. But if you guys do want um me to do trades, we can do that in like the 24 or maybe next year when we do these like year later. We're at number three with the Giants. I think they would also go with quarterback, and I think they'd go Tyler Shough. Because I mean, I know like, and it's kind of crazy how like people were saying this QB class is one of the worst, and 26 is going to be so much better. Well, it turns out that like three guys probably should have been first rounders. Meanwhile, this year you might only get one now that LA's traded out of the first round, trading for Trent McDuffie. Um, but I think the Giants, you don't get Dart. Abdul Carter was fine at the end of the year, but I think if you're the Giants, you would take Shock. Seeing how well he did with the Saints um down the stretch, I think they would believe that he could be that guy. And who knows, maybe these three teams would have their franchise quarterbacks. Two of them have, Cleveland doesn't. And I think that's how it starts, QB, QB, QB. But maybe you think the Browns or Giants would go different direction and they would draft a quarterback, later on, maybe. Moving on to four with the Pats, I think it's a tackle, and I think it's the guy who, in my opinion, I would have gone if I was the Pats, which was Kelvin Banks. Just because, um, like I thought he was the number one tackle prospect. If Josh Simmons was healthy, I probably would have put him number one. But I think Banks was amazing Um, and I think the Pats kind of regret passing on him and going with Will Campbell. Not saying Will Campbell's a bad player, it's just Campbell more than likely will have to kick in the guard. I know people, still think he can play left tackle, but it's just he struggled a lot. Even before the injury, he was struggling a lot. And Banks, who struggled early, but then found his stride as the year went on and proved that he was an elite left tackle. I think the Patriots would redraft and go Banks over Campbell. So, yeah, so that's the top four. Here comes the Jags pick, which I think is very interesting because you could go Travis Hunter. You could just say, if we just kept him at corner, if had him play a little bit receiver, he would have stayed healthier and he would have been a tremendous add. But I feel like um with the way like this team was so great without him, I don't know if they really would redraft him knowing they could get a better player. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. had a down year. They trade for Jacoby Myers. So I think in this redraft, you don't have Myers on the team. I think they would go with Ted McMillan at number 5. I know you might say, oh, it's a little too high for McMillan, but look, Jacksonville, like their defense, you could say you could go defense, but I think their defense was, pretty good. And outside of like maybe replacing Devin Lloyd, which there's no linebacker to go here, at least this high, we will have a linebacker to go land on the first round. But I think, with BTJ's progression, having to trade for Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington emerging, I think wide receiver would have been a bigger need, especially if they played Travis Hunter more at wide receiver than corner, which I thought was the bad decision. I thought you should have, have him as a corner for like most of the time, and then have him play receiver. Because like with receiver, a lot more guys are like coming in and out of the offense. Meanwhile, for a corner, it's like you have your two outside guys, inside guy. You don't really have many corners like going in and out of plays the way you have with receivers. So I think with them more prioritizing Travis as a wide receiver, it makes sense to go with McMillan, who was amazing for Carolina. Moving on to the Raiders, I think it comes down between Armand Membu or Josh Simmons, and they have Colton Miller at left tackle, so I think they would go Membu. Um, Ashton Genty, we'll get to him later, and he will be a first round pick, but it's just I think Vegas would rather have taken the right tackle of the future to help out this offensive line, which was one of the worst, and take a running back later, which this class was loaded at running back. We'll see multiple guys go in this first round. And so Membu, I think, would be the better pick, knowing how bad this Raiders offensive line was. And who knows, maybe with an improved offensive line, with that young right tackle opposite of Colton Miller, maybe the interior's better and maybe the Raiders season goes differently than what they expected. So moving on to the Jets, who are not going to get Armand Membu. Like looking at the tackles, I mean, there are some guys like that you could say, maybe we take a chance on. Like, I mean, like you could say Will Campbell and put him at guard. You could say I wouldn't say look. Campbell's probably the only guy we would maybe consider, but I think you kind of wish maybe one of the quarterbacks was available here, because then maybe you could have secured a guy for the future. But I think, with the Jets having a horrible year and not much good things happening. I think they would go Emeka Egbuka. I know you might be like, what? They would go receiver? But yeah, I mean, you have Garrett Wilson, who a great receiver, but they didn't have much outside of that. And with the top tackle prospect going, um, I think they would go with Buka. I think they would help out um, Justin Fields, maybe with another receiver out there. He's better. Who knows? But I think Ibuka would give this Jets offense another boost and really help them out for the future. We're on to the Panthers at 8. Obviously, not going to get Ted McMillan. You could go maybe Burden. Um, there's not really many other receivers I'd consider taking here in the first round. But I think the Panthers, who needed defensive help, like receiver was a need because Leggett was a disappointment. But I think with the guys on the board, I think they go Abdul Carter and land that franchise edge rusher. He was still fine. He wasn't great at the beginning of the year, which is why I do get why you might push him down the board, but he still was pretty great in the second half of the year. But he was getting more playing time, and I think on a Panthers defense where he would be the no doubt top edge rusher, he wouldn't have to compete with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau for time. I think he would have been a defensive player of the year candidate. And given this Panthers defense an elite edge rusher, they haven't had since Brian Burns, and Carter would be even probably better. Went on to the Saints at 9. I think I'm gonna go Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. It's just in my opinion, Simmons was um Simmons was he was, if it wasn't for his injury, he probably would have gone to New England at number 4. And you could argue him or Banks. I think Banks is better, but I still think Simmons was pretty good for a Chiefs offense that was not that great. And they don't get their left tackle, but they still get an elite left tackle who, dealt with some off the field stuff, but when he was playing was amazing and would be able to keep whoever that franchise guy, since it's not going to be Shuck, there. We're on to 10 with the Bears. I mean, you could go Colson Loveland. I would not hate that. Personally, I would consider going with a defender just because that defense was not that great. I didn't think they needed to go offense in the first round. Clearly, Ben Johnson, one of them too. You could go Ashton Genty or Hampton. But looking down, I think they would honestly go Mason Graham. They signed Grady Jarrett, Jervon Dexter, but they really don't have that long-term interior guy. And I think Graham, who really did shine out, he didn't have the greatest defensive line season where it's you're like, oh my God, he's like what Jalen Carter did or plenty of other guys. But he was still really good, and the Bears defense that, you know, was really just like it wasn't the greatest. They just relied on turnovers. I think getting Graham would really help out this Bears defense. Went on to the Niners at 11. I think this is where I'm going to have Will Campbell go, and I think he'd play guard in this situation because there's the uncertainty with Trent Williams. But the Niners have needed offensive line help, and their defense was much improved despite injuries, including to the 11th overall pick, Michael Williams. So I think they would be okay going with a guy who they could put at guard, still be really talented, and would be able to give this Niners team a long-term future of the offensive line because they've always kind of reliably had not the greatest offensive lines, but the scheme under Kyle Shanahan makes them so great where it's like they don't need to have elite offensive line play. They just need to have decent play. But I think getting Campbell would really help out this Niners team. Dallas, I think this is an easy one. I think I'm gonna go Gray Zabel. Tyler Booker was fine, and if you want to have him in this redraft, I don't hate it. Um, but or if you want to have him in this spot, I don't hate it. But Zabel was amazing. He anchored, that interior, giving Seattle one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL. And Dallas reliably always has good offensive linemen. Booker had a fine rookie year, but I think Zabel would be an amazing pick to give this Cowboys offensive line another young, elite offensive lineman for the future. What are the Dolphins at 13? This is an easy pick. I'm gonna go Travis Hunter. The fall ends for Hunter at 13. I mean, look, Miami needed corners. Even during the draft, they had Ramsey and then nothing else. Hunter would give you that. And then if you also want to play him at receiver, that'd be fine. I mean, Tyreek Hill sustained the injury and is no longer a part of the team. And they might end up trading Jalen Waddle. So it's like Hunter, not saying he would immediately become the top corner and receiver on the team, but if they wanted to use him in those situations, the number one corner, I mean, him and Minkah Fitzpatrick in that secondary, I think would be one of the best. And then him and Jalen Waddle as wide receivers would be a really nice tandem and give this Miami um, team a young building block who they could use on both sides of the ball. Moving on to 14 with the Colts. I think I'm going to kick the pick of Tyler Warren. I loved it at the time. I was like, wow, the Bears went Colston Loveland over Tyler Warren, and I still think Warren's the better player. Loveland had a phenomenal end of the year and made it to the playoffs while Warren's production went down once Daniel Jones went down with an injury. So, like, Warren started to go down when his QB wasn't playing well. Meanwhile, Loveland's play started to go up as the Bears were playing well down the stretch. So I think people have Loveland over Warren just because of how the season ended. But I think Warren, a much better pick. And I think Indy does not regret selecting the guy at 14th overall. 15th, I think I'm going to have the Falcons go edge rusher. And I think that I'm going to have them go with a guy by the name of James Pierce. I know the off the field stuff is there, but he still had a defensive rookie of the year season. He was amazing and really gave this Atlanta defense, which they haven't had since like 2016 with Vic Beasley, maybe 2017, but like they haven't had an elite pass rusher in a while, and Pierce was that, and I don't think, especially because they're not going to have that first later on, and they traded up with the Rams, Atlanta would snag him here to make sure he's there for the future. Cardinals, I'm going to keep their pick with Walter Nolan. I mean, he was still phenomenal. Didn't play all the year. He was banged up early, but when he was playing, he was amazing. And I don't think Monty Ford he's not regretting this pick. He loves Walter Nolan, and I was surprised Kenneth Grant went ahead of him at Miami. Like, what? And I was proven right because Walter Nolan was amazing. Grant it was a huge bust of a pick. Went on to the Bengals. They are not going to go Shamar Stewart. You could argue Jalen Walker, maybe Michael Williams. Um, like there was a lot of edge prospects, but I think I'm going to go with an intriguing prospect who I thought was a first round player every day, all day, in Nick Eamon. I mean, Cincinnati needed help and all throughout that defense. And Eamon, who I think would definitely have helped this Bengals defense out. Now, maybe the pre-draft concerns of him ending up being just like Jeremy Chin, who's bounced around the league after his rookie contract. So I get that, but I think Eamon, under Al Golden, who had Kyle Hamilton, who's kind of using that same role Eamon was with Seattle, I think would be able to keep him fit, and it would give Cincinnati a young defender that the fans can actually be happy the team has him instead of being like, oh, we missed out. But on to Seattle, I think this is where Tyler Booker would end up. Just kind of having him and Zabel flipped. Um, I still I think in Seattle he would have been, not as great as Zabel, but still really good. And Seattle needed to improve their interior offensive line. They did it with Zabel. Obviously not going to get him. So I think Booker would have been a phenomenal pick. Moving on to the Bucks at 19. Not going to go wide receiver, even though Luther Burden is available, and um, we'll have him going. I think they needed defensive help, and I'm going to go Carson Schlesinger. I know it took him a while. It took me a while to get him off the board, but Tampa has needed a linebacker. I mean, Levante David isn't playing. He isn't going to be playing forever. And it was clear this defense, while it has playmakers, still needs to be improved. I mean, Emeka Buka drafting looks phenomenal, but I think in a redraft, they would go defense to help out this team. Moving on to the Broncos at 20. I'm going to go Ashton Genty, falling all the way to pick 20. And I mean, Denver, Jahdae Barron might turn out to be a phenomenal corner. I still didn't really like the pick. I thought Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, even Siobhan Revel were better prospects at that position. None of those guys went on day one because of injury concerns, but I think they're all better. But yeah, Genty falls, and I think the Broncos would love this pick. RJ Harvey was fine, and we'll see what they do in free agency if they bring in a running back or not. But they would love Genty, and Genty would have had a much better rookie year if the Broncos had gone him instead of him going to the Raiders. What out of the Steelers? I think this is where Luther Burden ends up. And you trade away George Pickens later on. And Derek Barnett was fine, and they clearly needed to address stopping the run, which Harmon helped out with. But they needed help on offense. I mean, late in that season, especially when Metcalf got suspended those final 2 games of the season, there was nobody else really there to help out this receiving core. It was Pat Freiermuth and then a bunch of nobodies. And Burden, who I thought was a first round prospect, would instantly give Pittsburgh a secondary receiver for Aaron Rodgers to throw to, and it would help this Steelers offense out. Speaking of the Chargers, Um, and you could consider going with an interior offensive lineman. I don't think there's anybody available that was. So I'm just gonna keep the pick the same with UNC's Omarion Hampton. I mean, yeah, yeah, LA needed a running back badly, especially after um, Austin Eckler left and then J.K. Dobbins had a fine year in 2024, but was banged up. And Hampton, he was also banged up, but gives this Chargers offense a young running back, and it's honestly crazy how the Chargers skill position players, like probably the youngest group in the entire NFL, like Hampton entering his sophomore year, Gadsden entering his sophomore year, Trey Harris entering his sophomore year, Lad McConkey entering his third year, and Quinn Johnson entering his fourth year. We'll see what they do with Keenan Allen and if he returns, but a young supporting cast that could really pay dividends, especially if the Chargers want to go out in free agency and spend boatloads of money. They already have bringing in Tyler Biotish, who I think was just a cap casualty. I still think he's a really solid center, and that is one part in helping out that interior. But out of the Packers, I don't think there's any wide receiver you'd consider going here. Like there were guys who were fine, but I don't think there's anybody late down where you're like, oh yeah, they were for sure should have been top picks. So I think um it comes down to um yeah, I think it comes down to like who would the Packers go with at this point? And I think they've kind of always needed help in the secondary. And I think corner has been a major issue. I'm going Will Johnson. He had a phenomenal rookie year with the Cardinals. Um, stayed healthy and really um was amazing. And, a Packers team that, Jair Alexander was always that guy, but they never really had great play around him. They obviously moved off from him. And I hope, everything's great in his personal life after he stepped away from football after being traded at the deadline. Green Bay's needed top tier corner play, and they get it here with Will Johnson. Vikings at 24. Obviously, no quarterback you're going to take. Um, I think it comes down to like you could go tackle, especially with the injuries. You could go Donovan Jackson, which I think I am going to end up doing the same. I did consider maybe Malachi Starks, um, because Harrison Smith getting up there in age. Maybe you want to replace him, but I think Jackson was really solid as a rookie, and it gives Minnesota um, a long-term guy in the interior to help out whoever that quarterback is. Houston was going to keep their pick. I think they would go with the guy they selected later on in Ariana Taylor. I mean, they drafted him for a reason, and that reason was simple. They needed to help protect CJ Stroud. He had a phenomenal year. There's apparently reports that they might move him to right tackle and have Blake Fisher at left tackle since they traded away Titus Howard. Um, but Ursary was a phenomenal not a first round pick, a phenomenal draft pick by Nick Caserio, and he will be a hopeful franchise tackle wherever he's placed for Houston. The Rams at 26, not going to trade away this pick. And I think corner has always been a big issue. And I think they would go with a guy who is really solid in Jacob Harrison at Kansas State. I mean, you could argue Malachi Starks, because Quentin Lake's injury and like Cam Curl, who they did just extend, was a pending free agent because they signed him only to a 1 year deal, but they've needed help at the cornerback position. There's a reason why they traded away their first round pick this year for Trent McDuffie, or yeah, their first round pick for Trent McDuffie because they were like, we need corner help if we want to make it back to the Super Bowl. And Parrish, who had a really good year for a third round pick, slots in here. Ravens at, I think, defensively, like wide receiver, you're not going to go, even though I could see one of the Texans guys maybe pushing their way into the conversation, but I think this is a defensive pick. Malachi Starks was phenomenal, but I'm going to go with Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. Was a defensive player, the defensive rookie of the year, not defensive player, defensive rookie of the year, the finalist, just like his teammate James Pierce. And like Baltimore is known for elite defenses, so I think you just keep that out. I could see, Jalen Walker, going edge rusher here, but I think they went Starks for a reason because they knew they needed a safety opposite of Kyle Hamilton, and you pair him up with another Notre Dame safety that they weren't teammates, I'm pretty sure, but another Notre Dame safety, which I think would be phenomenal. They hired Notre Dame's DB coach this year, so he'd be able to work with two guys that he was with in college. Lions at 28. I think this is Jalen Walker. They have needed a secondary edge rusher. He wouldn't fully be an edge rusher. I think you'd also put him at linebacker, but Detroit needed defensive help. You could go, offensive line maybe. I don't know if there's many guys you'd take outside of Booker and Zabel and Donovan Jackson in this first round. So I think Walker would be phenomenal. Washington, another edge rush needy team. And I'm going to go with Nick Scourton out of A&M. I was a lot higher on him than most people. I thought he was a first round talent. He was my secondary edge rusher behind Abdul Carter and Washington, who needed to get better on the defensive side after kind of lucking their way to the NFC Championship game, like the easy schedule, and then everything clicking in 2024. Everything was not going to be going the way in 25, and hopefully, this off season, Adam Peters addresses their biggest needs and actually does help out this team because you have Jaden Daniels, you have Daniels, you have McLaurin, well, you have a star-studded offense. But like you have star players, they just need to bring in the right front office. The Bills, I think I am gonna end up going with one of the Iowa State guys, Higgins or Knoll. I'm gonna go with Higgins, who was phenomenal for Houston. And like Buffalo has needed wide receivers. I get corner was a need, but they have needed a wide receiver. You trade away Stephon Diggs, tried to not really replace him, but tried to bring in a guy like Keon Coleman who didn't work out. And Higgins, I think, would have worked out in Buffalo given this offense another guy outside of Khalil Shakir. One of the Chiefs at 31. I think offensive line probably was their biggest issue, but I don't think there's any guy you take in the first round. And this team has a lot of issues. There's plenty of picks you could go with, and I wouldn't hate it. And I'm gonna go with Derek Harmon. They lost to Sean Warren in the offseason, and kind of Like that defensive line was not the greatest. Defense as a whole wasn't the greatest at all. But Hank Harmon would give KC a run stuffing defensive tackle to really hold this team firm. And finally, the Eagles at 32nd. I'm going to go with their original pick, Jahad Campbell. And that concludes this 2025 redraft. Yeah, hope you guys like the video. Hope you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys on my next video. But until then, hope you have a great day and bye.